Hello, and thank you for joining this panel discussion on what matters most in human rights from a disability perspective. My name is Jessica Field, and I am the Community Outreach and Education Coordinator at Arch Disability Law Center. I would like to begin today's event with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that many of us are joining this panel from different traditional territories. I am joining you from the Niagara region, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Attawandaron peoples. This area is covered by Between the Lakes Treaty, Treaty 3, and is governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between Indigenous nations and later extended to all who come to live and care for the resources on this land. I am grateful to the Indigenous peoples of this region, and I am committed to continuing my own learning and accountability as an ally. Thank you. Okay. So before we begin this panel discussion, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes to support everyone's experience and to help our event run smoothly. This panel discussion will be recorded. Please make sure your microphones and video are turned off. This event is being presented with both ASL and captioning. For anyone who uses ASL or captioning, please review the information in the chat by selecting the chat button on your Zoom toolbar and choosing the first button labeled Everyone. Please note that the interpreters will be switching periodically. If you wish to ask a question, click the chat button on your Zoom toolbar and choose the new chat plus sign. Choose AA Questions. Type your question, press enter. If you wish to speak or sign your question, please choose AA Questions and type your name in the chat. The moderator will say your name when it's time for you to ask your question. At that time, you can turn on your video to sign or speak your question. We are unable to provide legal advice during this event. If you have questions or comments about a specific legal issue, please contact Arch directly. To access technical support, please email general@arch.clcj.ca. Now I'm happy to turn things over to my colleague, Michael Gottheil, our Senior Counsel at Arch. He will share a few words to introduce the main theme of today's panel discussion. Welcome, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a part of today's event. As Jessica said, I'm Senior Counsel at Arch. I've held this role since the beginning of March 2025. Previously, I had a number of roles in the administrative justice, human rights, legal system. I practiced law for a while. And I have to say, joining Arch, I really send my gratitude to Rob Latanzio, the executive director, for inviting me to join Arch. I knew it would be one of the highlights of my career. Arch is a fantastic organization, and every person I work with at Arch is just wonderful, have made me feel welcome, and it's thrilling to be part of the Arch team. And of course, the opportunity to assist people with disabilities, their families and allies across Ontario. So today's panel is, what does human rights mean to you as a person with a disability? I myself am blind. I'm a guide dog user. And so, what does human rights mean to me? Well, it's been my career, so that's one thing. And I say that with some humor, but the question, and people with disabilities know this, it means a lot of different things because though we may be labeled as persons with disability, uh, and we may be forced uh, to foreground or really focus ourselves and our identity as a person with a disability as we confront barriers and enablest non-accessible system. We are, of course, much more than that, each one of us. We have cultural, ethnic, linguistic backgrounds. Um, we obviously have our members of family. We have different family experiences, siblings, our parents and grandparents and children and grandchildren in some cases and so forth. So and of course we're humans living in this world which is of course global, and we're aware of all sorts of things going on around the world. Uh, some of which, and it seems so often these days, they are things that uh, really are antithetical or to human rights. Whether it be genocides or torture, um, and displacement, racism, uh, uh, discrimination on the basis of disability, gender identity, or sexual orientation. These things are going around the world, and as not only as people with disabilities who think about human rights a lot, but just as members of society and the global community, as people, human beings, we care deeply about human rights violations, and we are obviously concerned about the way human rights around the world often seem to be ignored, or worse, that governments and others, will pay lip service, or worse, use human rights as a justification to wage wars or attacks on marginalized populations. So human rights obviously means a lot to all of us. But of course, in this, the context we're talking today, perhaps, we want to focus on domestic human rights and our lives in Ontario. Of course, there are statutes, the Ontario Human Rights Code, which was the first human rights legislation in Canada and prohibits discrimination on a number of grounds, including disability, in a number of social areas, education and goods and services, employment, and and so forth. So things that we uh, interact with as members of the community on a daily basis. So, and of course, there's other legislations, AODA, many people are familiar with, which establish accessibility standards. And then, of course, just because of the Human Rights Code and AODA, organizations, whether it's employers or hospitals, long-term care facilities, schools and school boards, service providers, um, levels of government that we may rely on to provide a framework where we can have the resources and the ability to participate, uh, to live independently, or live as we choose. So those organizations all are bound to respect human rights. So even though we may not uh, advance our human rights, through the Human Rights Tribunal or the courts or whatever, through the legal system, we rely on human rights, and we expect our human rights to be respected when we deal with uh, organizations, government, employers, hospitals, as I said. And so when we say, what does human rights mean to us? We often, focus on, well, I can file a human rights complaint, which is true, and we can. And I noticed from some of the questions that were submitted, many of the questions were asking about specific situations that people have experienced and challenges or disappointments or frustrations that people feel when trying to advance legal claims. But equally, a number of the questions, uh, as I said a moment ago, relate to just frustrations and confusing when we expect long-term care facilities, when we expect attendant care providers, when we expect the government, when we expect the school board to act in a way which give full effect to our human rights. So uh, all to say is that human rights impact us in many different, across the spectrum of activities of daily living and ways that we are able to participate and be included or wish to be included in the broader society. And sometimes we may want to file a complaint. Sometimes uh, knowing our rights can give us the agency and the strength and the confidence to assert those rights and demand those rights in, whether it's going into a store or restaurant as a person who uses a service dog like myself, or going to sit down with a principal in a school and talking about, your child or young adult who needs uh, supports. Knowing your rights uh, can be very empowering in that sense. So, a bit of a background on sort of the scope of human rights, the importance of human rights, and how there's a range of ways that I think both in my personal and professional experience, the way human rights impacts and sometimes in a positive way, sometimes unfortunately it's negative experiences that when we try to assert our human rights, but nonetheless, it is a broad spectrum in all our lives. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jessica to introduce our panelists, which anyway, I hope the panel discussion this afternoon proves to be enlightening and entertaining and also thought-provoking for all of us. So Jessica, back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Um, as Michael said, we have three panelists with us today. Their full bios are on our website, but I'd like to do a short introduction. First, I'd like to introduce Paul Scotland. Paul is a federal crown lawyer in Toronto and is also the chairperson of Arch's board of directors. He is a strong disability activist and passionate about human rights for people with disabilities all across Ontario. Thank you for being here today, Paul. Next, we have Brianne Taggart from Kingsville, Ontario. Brianne is an artist and disability advocate. She is involved with several self-advocates committees across the province and is committed to creating change for persons with disabilities through her art and advocacy work. Finally, we have Tara Gibson. Tara is a volunteer member at Arch's Respecting Rights Project. Tara's advocacy focuses on teaching people with disabilities about their decision-making rights and advocating for accessibility within her local community. Thank you, Tara, Brianne, and Paul for being with us today, and looking forward to having a meaningful discussion. So the way that we're going to do this is we have 4 questions. Each panelist has a unique question to them. So, however, the first question is for all speakers. It's a general question, and we will start with Paul. Paul, if you don't mind to unmute yourself, please. And we'd like to ask you, what does human rights mean to you as a person with a disability?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to join the panel today. For me, human rights means having the ability to fully participate in all aspects of life within Canadian society, Ontario, community in which I live, and the surroundings. Accessibility and inclusion are, for me, human rights. We all share in the responsibility, I think, to remove the obstacles and just to make society more accessible and accepting and providing space for us to thrive in society and be active participating members of society who contribute fully to the best of our abilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate your perspective. Next, we'll have Brianne. Brianne, if you wouldn't mind unmuting, and I'll ask you the same question. Brianne, what does human rights mean to you as a person with a disability?
To me, human rights means being treated with respect, compassion, understanding. I think that inclusion for people with disabilities is very important. When we talk about human rights, we also need to make sure that everyone is included and not separated from society.
Thank you, Brianne. And Tara, I will ask you the same question. What does human rights mean to you as a person with a disability?
Human rights is important to me in trying to live my life to the best and fullest of my ability. I volunteer with various groups in my community. It was important when I went to school. My mom fought for me a lot to go to school, and I guess it's just important in my everyday life as I try to live my life the best I can.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. This next question asks our panelists to share from their personal experiences and focuses on the challenges people with disabilities still face when trying to access their human rights. This question is for Paul. If you would like to unmute, please. Paul, you are a lawyer and activist. What do you think are some of the main challenges for persons with disabilities when trying to advance their human rights, and why is it important to raise awareness about these challenges?
I think one of the biggest challenges for persons with disabilities is overcoming the barrier of attitudes as well as either physical and structural barriers, because it impacts every facet of our lives just as it does those who do not have disabilities. So for instance, whether it is trying to navigate leaving your home to get to someplace, we may have different needs in terms of being able to get from place to place. So whether it's an accessible form of transportation or adaptive equipment. So those are things that I think both members of society as well as people who make laws need to be attuned to so that we can have better access and provision so that we can better integrate into society and contribute. Um, you know, we're not a monolith. We're all unique and individual. So in order to really be inclusive, one needs to be expansive and open to new approaches to creating an environment that allows for full participation.
Thank you.
Was he?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if we highlighted or if you wanted to touch base on like why it's important to raise awareness about these challenges. I think yeah.
I think
You
in
did, you
terms.
did, yeah.
Okay, so in terms of raising awareness, I think one of the issues is uh, we are either a big group or a small group in terms of the community. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of weight placed on our collective or individual shoulders to do a lot of self-advocacy and educating, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in service centers, education, hospitals, social services, just to be able to advocate and be understood what the needs are and to be provided with the appropriate forms of support. That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much. I remember, Tara, when you and I were preparing for this panel discussion, you said something similar as Paul in terms of, um, it falls a lot on people with disabilities to raise awareness about challenges or fight for our human rights, but really it should kind of sometimes, Tara had said, I don't know if Tara, if you wanted to chime in here. I know this is kind of going to be a discussion between all of us. I want to open this panel so everybody can feel like we can kind of just have a discussion here, but the importance of, society kind of taking on that role or getting the support from society a little bit more and not having it always fall on the people with disabilities, but rather, society as well. So thank you. Okay. Brianne, many people with disabilities experience barriers to employment. From your experience as an artist who sells your artwork, what barriers have you noticed in the arts community? And do you think they are similar to the barriers people with disabilities face in other jobs? Oh, sorry, Tara, I see you've unmuted. Did you want to make a comment about what Paul had mentioned about the importance of raising awareness?
No, I'm okay
No?
for now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Brianne, so the first part of your question is what barriers have you noticed in the art community? And then do you think they are similar to barriers people with disabilities face in other types of jobs?
When artists with disabilities try to sell their artwork, they can face many barriers. Some people can't attend events or go to galleries because of the accessibility issues or because transportation is hard to find. That's especially hard in a small town. I don't drive, so sometimes to get places it is very difficult. And sometimes the fee for having your artwork in galleries is very expensive. Not many people with disabilities can afford the fee, which makes participating in those art shows inaccessible. I can sell my artwork on places like Marketplace, but I have to be careful with that. Yes, I think people with disabilities who have or want jobs in general face the same similar barriers because transportation in small towns is very difficult, especially in bad weather too, if someone's walking. Also, attitudes of other people or lack of support can be a barrier.
Brianne, yeah, that's very true. I know when we were preparing for this panel discussion, we uh, talked a lot about your experience in a small town. Do you think that experiences for artists who live in a small town or just people with disabilities who are looking for employment face the same challenges as maybe someone from Toronto or someone from a bigger city? Do you think that there are differences in the barriers that you face to employment?
Um, yes, I think so. With living in a bigger town, such as Toronto, for people with disabilities, that may be easier for them for transportation. But living in a small town like me, it's very hard to find the transportation sometimes. Sometimes you have to rely on people, but you can't always rely on people, or you can't always rely on the taxi to be on time because there's only one taxi cab around here. So, I mean, taxi cab company, sorry. But in a bigger town, there be better accessibility and transportation, I think.
Transportation was a huge topic between you and I when we were discussing your answers. So thank you, Brianne. Really appreciate it. Tara, this one's for you. What makes it hard for people with disabilities to get the support and services they need, like attendant care and community participation supports? And what impact does that have on their lives? So the first part of your question is, what makes it hard for people with disabilities to get the support and services that they need? We spoke a lot about attendant care and community participation.
Not knowing what's out there.
Mm.
I think like education of what's out there is important, but in order to get the education to know what's out there, you need to get out there. So it's kind of like a circle.
Would you agree with Brianne? Because I know you're from Toronto and Brianne is from a smaller town, you're from a bigger city. Do you want to share a little bit about like your experience or your thoughts on the transportation piece? So you mentioned that what can make it hard for people with disabilities to get supports and services is definitely transportation, definitely, not knowing what resources are out there. It's hard to get resources. Do you find that living in Toronto, the transportation piece or like access to resources is still a challenge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because even though Toronto is a bigger city, because Toronto is a bigger city, you need to book transportation a week in advance. So sometimes you don't get Wheel-Trans or a taxi or something to go to where you need to go.
And what impact do you think that these barriers in transportation or like not knowing what resources are out there like what impact does that have on people with disabilities' lives?
It has negative impact because like the thing that the gentleman before was talking about the community and society needing to take some responsibility and not leave all the responsibility on the person with the disability. If your community is open to you, like for example, I worked with Friends of Roxton Road Park to make the parks more accessible and make community. I helped put buttons on the building to open the doors, and put accessible bathrooms in, and put plugs to plug in power wheelchairs, so if they ran out of power, that somewhere there'd be somewhere to plug them in.
Yeah, so your experience with working with the community, like you said, is being involved in multiple committees. I know we spoke about, like you said, being a part of these committees and making small changes, such as putting in accessible buttons, or I know at the parks, accessible features to make the parks accessible. How important is that? How important it is that people get involved in their community and try to make small change? Like, do you think making small change in your community can result in a bigger change, a bigger impact, a positive impact for people?
Most definitely, because people like able-bodied people or people who are not impacted by disability can have their attitudes change just minutely or maybe in a big way. It depends, but a lot. I've had a lot of positive, but also a lot of negative as well. Because people don't want to, they're afraid of retribution, maybe.
And that we'll get into that in our last question. I think we spoke a lot about the fear that some people with disabilities have when it comes to advocating for their rights, or maybe pushing the barriers and that sort of thing. So thank you for bringing that up. And I will definitely ask you more about that in our next coming questions. Thank you so much, Tara.
Okay.
Yeah. We have two more questions. So the next question, society's view on disability and human rights change over time. This is true for persons with disabilities, their families, friends, and the broader public. Let's take a moment to discuss how our panelists' perspectives on human rights and disability has changed as they have learned, grown, and moved through different experiences. This question is for Paul. Paul, based on your own lived experience, how have your views about human rights for people with disabilities changed over time, and what influenced those changes?
Having been born with a mobility impairment, I think I've had a lot of lived experience, and then getting studies and so on and so forth, and sort of I think has sort of made me more energized in a sense. I think my parents were advocates for me in terms of accommodations or issues at school when I was younger. Obviously, as I got older, I was able to advocate for myself. I know that one of the first experiences I had in terms of seeking employment was my first job. And I'll always remember that there was an application, a part of the application that asked about something about disability. And I indicated that I had leg braces. And I never got a call for the interview. But myself being, I guess, self-advocating, I ended up going and meeting with the person. And when they saw leg braces, they assumed I used crutches. So I couldn't possibly use, use my hands to shelf and sort books. I would say to you that was a very eye-opening experience. And I think, quite frankly, it was very impactful and almost very destabilizing, because I think I spent a lot of years there when others might have moved on after 2 years as a part-time job to get different experiences. But the thought of having to go through that time and time again was not something that I could really easily countenance. Similarly, I think, a few of the other panelists have touched on it in terms of transportation. I live outside the city of Toronto. So in terms of having to now navigate trying to get mobility pass, I now have to deal with the city of Toronto as well as the municipality in which I live. And hopefully, it will come through and it will be, relatively smooth sailing. These are things that have taken time. It's doesn't seem to be cookie cutter, to use the expression, but at the same time, it just seems like it's glacial. Although the gains, as they do come, are quite significant and are profoundly changing the lives of people with disabilities. But got a long way to go. Got a long way to go.
Yeah, we definitely do have a long way to go. And this might be going into our next question, but do you think that I don't want to say hope, but are you positive for the future that things could change? Like you talk about specifically, I guess, in employment, because me too, like I have a physical disability as well. I have cerebral palsy and it affects the right side of my body. And I too, along with, the panelists, Brienne and Tara, have experienced issues and barriers to employment. Do you see that shift, and maybe not our own perspectives, but the perspectives of employers, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. Like, do you think there's any way that can change, or in a positive way, anything that we can do or that should be done? I don't know if
Well,
that's a loaded question. Sorry about that.
I'll answer it as best I can from my own personal experience.
Yes.
I trained as a lawyer, so I did all of the things that law students do. You apply to do your placement somewhere, and you get interviews and so on and so forth. Well, I spent the bulk of my years since I've been called to the bar working as a sole practitioner, because I couldn't get too many jobs that meant I could be employed and be salaried. I mean, and I'm with the federal Crown now, and this is year 3, but this is year 3 out of, I won't tell you how many years I've been a lawyer, but quite a few. Where my classmates might be looking at retirement, that's not in my immediate orbit. But yeah, it's a struggle. But you just got to keep pressing on. That's all you can do. So I have hope, but it's really chastened hope, because I haven't seen the great gains that I would have hoped for through employment equity and other things. When I see the stats are very discouraging. People with disabilities are single digits in terms of employment absorption, and that's not even wading through the weeds as to whether they're permanent, contract, or occasional. So, finish there.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. As we're having this discussion, questions are coming
absolutely,
up and thoughts
absolutely.
are coming up. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you for that answer. Brienne, we will go to you now. So you are an advocate and artist. How do you think your work as an artist and your work as an advocate come together to create change, or to change people's perception on disability?
Yes, I do believe it brings awareness that people with disabilities can do amazing things and awesome things like doing presentations about advocacy, speaking up, and that they can express themselves through art. And when people buy my art, it makes them happy, and it also makes me happy too, because it takes a lot of work to be an artist and to be put in the spotlight for when you had to speak up through advocacy and presentations and all of that. And yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It does take a lot of effort, not just in, I guess, becoming an artist and working on your art, but also the advocacy work that you do. I know that you also teach art. You were telling me, right? So, who do you teach art to? Do you teach art to other people with disabilities, or maybe people who don't identify as having a disability? When you teach people art, does the topic of advocacy ever come in? Like, do you ever kind of put the two together sometimes when you're teaching?
Um, yes, I do. And yes, I do teach people with disabilities. I do that virtually because I was doing that in person before the pandemic. But when the pandemic, then we decided to when it was okay to, we decided to do this virtually. So it also shows that when you advocate, you can have virtual and hybrid too. And also, with teaching virtually, more people can attend. So we all have a wonderful time, and I get paid to do it. And it's a great time for everyone because we can do it from our homes and not have to worry about transportation to get there or the bad weather if we have to walk somewhere. So it makes it great.
I remember we were talking about, and I know the pandemic was a little while ago, but how sometimes things like that can open up opportunities for people with disabilities. And you were really talking about how it gave you a sense of community, especially in the art community, to be able to teach and connect with people online. And I guess I was just wondering, you know, with having all this online work that you do, has has that changed your thoughts on, the work that you do, your advocacy work, your artwork? Because you started advocating in 2017, which was before the pandemic and everything. Did you see a change from, I guess, before to now? And is it a positive change or maybe not so much?
Oh, I've seen a positive change. More people are asking, what do I do? What does self-advocate, what a self-advocate is? And uh, even through my work, people are asking about committees I'm on and what I'm doing and things like that. And it's opened a lot of doors that wouldn't be available if there was if there was an virtual option.
Thank you so much, Brianne. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. Tara, your question is, at Respecting Rights, we teach others about their decision-making rights and remind them that they should not get in trouble for advocating for themselves. When you advocate for your rights, what do you want people to understand about disability? And do you think your advocacy has changed people's perspective on inclusion and the rights of persons with disabilities? So the first question is, when you advocate for your own rights, what do you want people to understand about disability, or maybe when you're advocating not only for your own rights, but the rights for others? What do you want people to understand about disability?
That we're just trying to live our lives to the best of our ability.
Yeah. Do you want to add a little bit more to that if you can, or
Um,
what does that like, just trying to live our lives the best of our ability? What do you mean by that?
like going to school, going to volunteer work, going to work, whatever we want to do.
Having access to things, being included.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you think your advocacy work has changed people's perspectives on the rights of people with disabilities?
Sometimes I feel very negative about it. But sometimes I get some positive feedback.
When we were prepping for this, we were talking about how sometimes our answers might not always be so, or our experiences might not be so positive, right? And that's
Yeah.
okay. It's important to kind of go with the flow and ride the waves and understand and acknowledge that advocacy isn't a straight line we were kind of talking about, right? It kind of
No, for
goes in
sure.
waves, and there's
Yeah.
good things about it and there's not so good things about it, and
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we wanted to do a bit of a poll question or an interactive question with the audience. So we do have a poll question that we're going to, I guess, share with everybody in the audience. And the question is, do you think that the general public has a better understanding of the rights of people with disabilities than in the past? Your answers could be yes, no, or no change. Again, the question is, do you think that the general public has a better understanding of the rights of people with disabilities than in the past? We'll give a few moments for everyone to answer.
Hi, it's Mala. My poll disappeared. I don't know how to, I'm using voiceover. I don't know how to answer. I wanted to say no, yeah, no is my answer.
Thank you, Mala. Thank you for sharing. Sorry about that it disappeared, but appreciate your input. Thank you.
I lost mine as well.
Oh.
I don't, can it be brought up again?
I think so. Yes, I think we can relaunch the poll if I'm not mistaken. So we can do that. And if you're able, feel free to also use the chat. If you're able, you can put in your answer through the chat. But maybe we can end the poll and then relaunch it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I've just got confirmation that it will be relaunched. So we could try that again if folks wouldn't mind. Okay, it seems like everyone the answers are in. So according to this new poll, 32% of the audience says yes, 55% of the audience said no, and 13% of the audience said no change. Very interesting. Thank you all so much for putting your input. Now I will ask our panelists our final question. We will have another poll for the audience after this final question, and then we will move into the question and answer portion of our panel discussion today. So, thinking ahead, making real progress for people with disabilities will include making many changes, such as new laws, better policies, and shifts in how society views disability and human rights. We are now going to ask our panelists to share what changes they think are most important for the future of persons with disabilities in regards to human rights and discrimination. So we'll start with Paul. And Paul, I know we touched upon this a little bit in the last question, so my apologies. But what changes are needed, or what changes do you think are needed in Ontario to ensure that people with disabilities can fully exercise their human rights in daily life? And do you think that change is possible?
I think it starts with education. So whether it's through TV announcements, all the forms of media, internet, Facebook, whatever the case may be, if it could be limitless, so as to reach a broad swath of the population. The changes need to come in terms of attitude so that we can really get rid of structural barriers and, make society more inclusive, accessible. I'm not under any illusion whether I'm talking about my own individual needs, but clearly access to transportation, education, employment, the supports in place so that one can, succeed and thrive, in any and all aspects that require, or one would expect, leads to a full participation in every aspect of what city, community, country, province has to offer. It's doable, but it's almost as if you need a rocket booster to get it started, or to kick it into high gear, whichever is the proper metaphor. But that's what I see is necessary. But there has to be a heart and mind that really wants to see it, and I don't know that it's there either in terms of public representatives or in terms of the communities in which we live. It's almost as if I'm not trying to make light. If somebody has something happen to them and it's temporary, then all of a sudden they realize that their mobility is impacted and they need this and they need that. But for a lot of us, it's either lifelong or it's acquired, and it's acquired to be lifelong. So if I can have something, why is it not something that everybody can feed into, as we need to change how society or how we deal with stairs with no railings, for example. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you. There's still so much change that needs to be done, and so we've come so far, but we still have so much more that needs to be done, and that people, society, government could be doing. So thank you for that perspective. Yeah. Brianne, some of the advocacy work that you do with your community and advocacy groups may take bold positions that might make some people uncomfortable or seem different from what the government expects. Some self-advocates might be told that they're pushing the boundaries and going too far, and some may feel afraid because they rely on government support and don't want to impact the types of services that they receive. What would you say about that?
I would say we do this on the Council of Community Living Ontario, which I'm a part of. And sometimes it is hard to talk to the government. We also try to get people to sign petitions. Sorry, I was having trouble with that word. For certain things, and the government sometimes doesn't listen to us because people are still on wait lists for many services. And that's sad to think about. I think they thought it was just for supported homes, but our petition was for other services. Even though we sent the government our petition, people are still on wait lists, and those are long, and that takes a lot of time to get off the wait list for things such as having more support or more funding hours so they can do something with more password funding, which would be nice. I think also that I find a mix of people who are excited to sign and also make change or try to make change. But some people are a little scared too because they're scared of what the government will do and what they will say. I love being part of the council because you stand up for others. It takes a lot of courage and time and effort. That's why advocacy is so important. So keep on speaking for others because one day you will be heard. It might just take a lot of time, but council is helping with that. But even with us, it takes a lot of time to set up meetings, talk to people, get them to know our real issues, and make them listen a lot harder to people with disabilities. But that's why advocacy is so important. That's why we should still stand up for others, speak about our own experiences, create change.
Thank you, Brianne. And what advice or what would you tell somebody who's just starting out in advocacy or the advocacy work that you do, and might be afraid of getting in trouble or just might be afraid of losing their supports and services, even though they want to be involved in advocacy work. So somebody who wants to join a committee, wants to be involved in advocacy work, what advice would you give that person if they were scared to do so?
Oh, that's a good question. I would probably tell them not to be so scared. We won't always get in trouble, and when we speak about our own experiences, then the government may know where there's flaws, where there's issues they can help fix. If we don't speak up and tell them, or other people, how will they know when something needs to be fixed? If it's not us, then who will? And I would also tell them to take it slow with advocacy, watch what we do first, see if they like it, and if they do, then they should practice with us and start by creating change in the way they live. Like, say one thing doesn't have a elevator, they could go to the town, address that, make it more accessible for someone that is having issues with walking or needs a wheelchair so people can be included. it just takes a little bit of effort to create a little bit of change. But even with me, I talk to my town about something, and then even though they didn't all listen, at least we created a little bit of change. But once we talk about topics that are important to us, people will eventually listen to us. That's why advocacy is so important.
Thank you, Brianne. And that just reminds me of something that one of our Respecting Rights members at Arch always reminds us, that good change comes slowly, or good change takes time. So it's always a good reminder that advocacy work is slow and steady and sometimes takes time. I appreciate that. Okay, Tara, this question is for you, and then we're going to end our panel discussion and go into one more poll for the audience. So, Tara, as we've mentioned throughout the panel, many people who use supports and services in their home or in the community may feel hesitant to advocate for themselves or be a part of a more broader community advocacy in fear of being punished. What changes are needed to make sure people with disabilities can feel safe and empowered to advocate for their rights?
I think changes in the attitudinal changes, in terms of the way advocacy is looked at sometimes, because sometimes it's, oh, you're causing trouble, you don't need to cause trouble. But people who advocate aren't trying to cause trouble, and they're not trying to get people in trouble, they're trying to create change.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you the same question as I asked Brianne. Is there any advice, or what would you tell someone who's just getting into advocacy? And anything you would tell them, or any advice you would give them if someone's just starting and maybe they're afraid to be part of the advocacy movement?
Just get involved to the best of your ability. If you're afraid, dip your toes in a little bit first, and then it's like getting into a swimming pool, I guess. Yeah. I don't know, just do the best you can.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists, Paul, Brianne, and Tara. We really appreciate your time and your perspective on the topic of human rights. We're going to do one last poll for the audience, and then we will turn this session over to some questions that we have from the audience. So this poll question is, after participating in today's event, do you feel more energized about disability justice? Please choose one: yes, no, or no change. Okay, it seems as though everyone who wanted to participate has had an opportunity to do so on the poll. It seems like they've stopped. So the results of the poll are 64% said yes, 9% said no, and 27% said no change. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We really appreciate it. Now we're going to move into the question portion of the event. And before we do, I do see there's a hand up on the Zoom. So, Hubert, I will welcome you to unmute if you have a question. I will also welcome any of the panelists, Michael, including yourself, to join in on the discussion of this next portion of our event. So go ahead, Hubert. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for coming in late, but I think I came in at the right time when Paul was talking about we need a rocket booster, because people are always talking about what's required. And I'm the executive director of Every Canadian Counts, where we believe, and these are the things that you mentioned, Paul, from a publicly funded national disability insurance plan, from all those with lifelong disabilities, from birth to end of life. So whether that's an acquired disability later in life. So we've been pounding at this for over a decade. We are getting far more buy-in now than we have possibly in the past. Somebody mentioned a petition. Yes, we have a petition out, but petitions get you so far. But this is something we've been working on very, very hard. We're made up of people with and without disabilities in our organizing. We're non-funded. We're all volunteers. And I think I spoke to you, Jessica, about a year or so ago, which I did want to put a proposal forward and speak to people. And there was no follow-up at that time, but I would welcome the opportunity to talk to a group and talk further on this. I don't want to take up a lot of time, especially coming in late. But this is a proven model in Australia, and they've just done a major, major review where now they're implementing changes. In Canada now, we have the wonderful opportunity to look at what went right, what went wrong, look at the Scandinavian countries, look at what Canada's done right, and don't take any of the bad stuff, and really bring in a plan that's universal across Canada, portable, no matter where you get it, where you apply, it follows you around the country, and it's based on your disability need, not some cap of something or other. Includes paid caregiving, home and vehicle modifications, therapies, professional services, all those things that would be paid basically through taxes. So actually those then that make the least amount of money would pay the fewest amount of taxes into this program. And please do reach out. I would love to talk further on a bigger group and describe further, but certainly follow us at everycanadiancounts.com. And info@everycanadiancounts.com will get you right to me. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that information, Hubert. I am mindful of time. We have about 15 minutes left for our event today. So I'm going to, I have 2 questions in the chat, and then I see we have another person with their hand up on Zoom. So maybe we'll do that, and then we'll leave some time for Michael to do a closing statement, and we will end our event shortly. So thank you. This question says, in general, how people see and understand human rights are often categorized by separate areas such as disability rights, language rights, gender rights, etc. But we know that this doesn't really reflect what our society is like. In your personal opinion to the panelists, do you feel that we are doing enough from the disability perspective, or do we need to do more to better protect the human rights of disabled people who have multiple identities, such as the ones that this person had mentioned? I don't know if anyone from our panel wanted to answer that question, or Michael. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Michael. I'll yeah, as I said at the beginning, I think people with disabilities and organizations need to be mindful. I mean, we talk a lot about intersectionality. Sometimes it just, we throw in the word to acknowledge that the reality that we all have multiple identities. And there are some organizations, great organizations, that actually focus on, like Dawn Canada, which focuses on disabled women, and other the Neil Belanger at BC and the Canadian Indigenous Disability Networks and that sort of thing, which is critically important. But we have to really we really have to dig into, well, what does it mean for people in their daily lives? So when you have, there's been a lot of work done in Toronto, for example, about different cities within the cities that may be a function of a racial identity or racialization, and well, how does that intersect with accessible transit, for example, or there has been work done in terms of gender identity and the lives of transgendered individuals who may need a disability-related supports, perhaps in older age, and those sorts of things. And so, I think Brianne mentioned, it sort of reminded me when we were talking about, if people are afraid or uncertain, how do you discuss these things? I think it's really important to acknowledge that the disability community is a really broad coalition, and there's lots of work to do, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work. And just because we're people with disabilities, we don't all have to agree on everything, and we don't have to work on everything. I mean, hopefully we are aligned with the general principle of nothing about us without us, and we're working towards agency and dignity for people with disability and inclusion. But there's so I think I don't know if I have an answer to the question, but I think it's a great question, and I think people and Takara's stick your toe in that, and that might be sticking your toe into a community that you feel comfortable in, or you already have a connection in. And I think when that's all combined, certainly we're stronger, but also, what we're saying will speak to so many more people within the people with disabilities.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you answering that question. Maybe we could move on to one more question, and then I see I'm gonna ask. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Chinyere. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question, feel free to do so.
Okay, I'm trying to make a contribution towards the advocacy. The question you asked, Tara, on the need for advocates to change the perspective, what's actually expected of it. I think, like you said, it's slow and steady. However, I think we should look more into education, because knowledge is power. If you don't know your right, you cannot advocate for it. So I think we should try as much as possible to stress more on inclusivity in education rights. Let's have inclusive education where every person with disability will be able to know his or her rights. And this goes especially to parents. In developing countries like Nigeria, where I come from, because of stigmatization, they don't like coming out to air their views or experiences, or let people know their challenges. You still see a situation where parents lock their children with disability to explore and let the government know that there are needs by these people. So I think we should do more, and I want to use this opportunity to appreciate Arch Disability Center for what they are doing, and if possible,
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if I've lost the connection there with you a little bit, but thank you so much for your perspective and sharing to this discussion. We really appreciate it. Okay, one more question, I think, and then we will end our event.
your doors to people from other countries is everybody's affair, and it can happen to anybody.
Sorry, I'm not sure if either Michael or Tara. Oh, there we go. I think we've lost that person for disconnection. But thank you. Okay, last question. Do you see any changes in the rights of people with disabilities compared to 3 years ago and now? And what do you expect to see in another 3 years? I think we touched upon that a little bit with the changes that we think. But does anybody want to touch on that? Do you see any changes in the rights of people with disabilities compared to 3 years ago? Oh, we have somebody who raised their hand. Louise, sure, absolutely. Feel free to unmute.
I'll be as quick as I can. I don't want to dominate at all, but what I will say is I volunteer at the museum, and one of the things I found out, they did a major renovation. When they were done, I better slow down for the interpreter, sorry. I'll put my face on too. When the ROM did the renovation to a washroom, they did a nice washroom, but there was some problems with accessibility. I pointed those out, and the ROM was very quick to want to fix it. But the city of Toronto had passed the inspection for this non-accessible washroom. Now, the ROM has definitely fixed it since then, and the problem is gone. But I think what takes me back is, where is the level of knowledge at the inspection level? Not only provincially, municipally, I don't even know federally, but I see so much lack of oversight. Same with aviation, many other things. Do you have any comments at all on that? Thank you.
Does anyone have any comments on that? If not, that's okay. And thank you, Louise, for your question and that information. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's that question and comment raises so many good points. It speaks to the fact that we do have laws or regulations, and yet, for whatever reason, in that case, the build passed the inspection when it shouldn't have. So, but certainly the law requires a fully accessible bathroom. So was it that inspector didn't know, they're too busy, there's some policy or approach that, well, as long as it's 90% good, we're going to pass it. Like, who knows? And that's the problem. Who knows? Why did that happen? And yet, so we have the law. We had, at least in that case, some blip or problem with the enforcement. And then we had, thankfully, a public or quasi-public institution, the ROM, that stepped up and did the right thing, because obviously they have a real commitment to accessibility. So good on them. And so, but it's like, what do you do with that? I guess you keep fighting. You keep bringing things up. We, are thankful that some institutions are committed to full accessibility, and we hope more and more through education and regulations there will be. But I also think it speaks to the need for accessibility legislation, effective accessibility legislation. So, whether it's the AODA or the Accessible Canada Act or other provinces and territories have a similar thing, because it really assists everyone. It assists obviously people with disabilities if barriers are removed, but it assists companies or institutions, service providers. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, this is how you make your bathroom accessible. And, I don't know why it wasn't fully accessible the first time at the ROM, but it's really helpful. And so what people with disabilities, hopefully, were involved at the level of collaborating with builders and architects and planning officials and so forth to make cities and places we go accessible, as opposed to filing human rights complaints against these companies and institutions because we're fighting after the fact to get things redone. And so both are important, of course. We need human rights protection, but I think it does underscore the value of effective accessibility legislation. And I know there's a lot of criticism about the ACA, that there's not enough standards. There's criticism about the AODA, that there's not effective enforcement. But at least in principle, it incorporates the education piece. It incorporates nothing about us without us. I think it's really a positive approach.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm just mindful of time. We have reached the end of our panel discussion today. Would you like to say a few words, closing statements to end our event today?
Well, I want to thank the panelists, and I can only say, wow, what a great, from my perspective, it was so wonderful to hear the thoughts and experience of the the diverse experience of the panelists coming from different communities and work, both advocacy and other kinds of work. How people interact with social supports and so forth. And although people spoke about some of the challenges we all face, challenges that maybe we haven't moved far enough, but with all of that, I know I feel way more energized. I want to thank the panelists and Jessica for the great work you've done in pulling this all together. I can tell people I know firsthand that Jessica's been great. And thanks for everyone participating. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And this recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. So you will be receiving an email with those details. I hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.